Okay, on today's show, Tony Blair has a warning for us all. 114 of these are closing, and apparently paying as you drive is happening. Let's begin. The article says that Sir Tony Blair has warned against putting futile pressure on the DUP to return to power sharing at Stormont ahead of Joe Biden's visit to Northern Ireland. The former Prime Minister spoke of the importance of using the American influence on the process with care and sensitivity. And the ex-Labour leader told BBC Radio 4 Today programme, the Americans can play a real role, but it's something that you need to do carefully because there's a difference between influencing and pressurising, and the one tends to be positive and the other can be negative. One thing I've learned about the unions is if you try to pressure them to do something that they're fundamentally in disagreement with, it's usually a futile pressure, even if it comes from the US, so you've got to use that influence carefully. The US President is due to arrive in Belfast this evening for a 4-day trip to Northern Ireland to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Mr Biden is expected to meet members of Stormont's main political parties as part of a visit. He said he will underscore his nation's commitment to preserving peace and encouraging prosperity in Northern Ireland. Now, whilst of course it is nice that the Good Friday Agreement has lasted 25 years and will hopefully last for much longer, I think in truth the only reason why the DUP might not be considering going back to Stormont is because of Rishi's Windsor Framework deal, which of course, as we all know, he touted to be something it really isn't according to many people, and didn't really seem to care what the DUP thought about it because he just went ahead, didn't he, and had the vote anyway, regardless of what the DUP actually said about it. They made it perfectly clear that they didn't want that deal, because from what I've heard, it actually basically shackles us to the EU through Northern Ireland. And that whole Stormont break that Rishi was going on about, basically saying, oh, it's wonderful, you could just veto any laws you don't like. That is how it came across, but as we all know, to actually use that veto, they have to go through so many hoops, and also the EU can technically sue us for some sort of compensation. This is absolutely mental. So to be honest, I'm not surprised at all that they may not like Rishi's deal. And I think for once, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I think Tony Blair might on this one single occasion, might have a little bit of a point that you shouldn't pressurise the DUP into doing anything that they don't want to do. I can't believe I just agreed with Tony Blair on that one thing. I feel a bit dirty now. But let's face it, at the end of the day, it's just the President of the United States coming over to Northern Ireland, which to be honest doesn't really have anything to do with America itself, does it? Just presumably because Joe Biden apparently comes from Northern Ireland or whichever one of the two. But if I was the DUP, I'd say, no, sorry, I'm not doing that just because you're coming over. Stick by your principles, DUP. And hopefully, the pressure might eventually mount on Rishi to change a few things about his Windsor Framework deal. Just makes me wonder if he's using Joe Biden in an attempt to get DUP to return to Stormont in the first place. The article says that drivers face paying even more to use their cars as plans for a new scheme have been revealed. Mayor Sadiq Khan, or Sad IQ Khan as I like to call him, has raised the idea of a pay-as-you-drive scheme in the capital where drivers will be charged depending on the time of the day, the distance and the number of passengers in their car. Speaking about the hopes for his new pay-as-you-go scheme, Khan explained that the driver would be charged according to the data for each journey. He told the Financial Times, road use charging is interesting. If you get rid of the congestion charge, get rid of ULEZ, get rid of road tax and charge people depending on how many miles they drive, how polluting their vehicle is and what time of the day they are driving. Are there alternatives related to public transport? How many people are in the car? That's potentially quite exciting. The problem is that technology is quite a long way off, and it comes as the Mayor of London revealed the ULEZ expansion is set to kick off on August the 29th. He told the newspaper, in outer London, 85% of vehicles are compliant with half of Londoners who don't even have a car. Speaking at the London Assembly last month, he added ANPR cameras could form part of the potential operation of such a scheme, but no proposals have been developed. And as part of the ULEZ expansion, TfL is planning to erect 2,750 additional cameras with 300 already installed across some boroughs. What is he actually trying to do? Get the rest of London to stop driving with his harebrained schemes or something? I mean, who the hell does this guy think he is? Expecting some form of technology to be in your car to determine how many passengers you've got in the car, and of course, what time of the day you go out on. It's got nothing to do with him. Presumably, of course, your details will all be put through the system, in which case they'll more than likely be able to track you through some sort of telematics system to judge how many miles you do. And don't be fooled where he says the technology is quite a way off, because companies such such as Onto and Elmo and other car subscription companies actually have a dash cam, which admittedly points to the road rather than in the car, and from what I've heard doesn't actually pick up audio, but also they have a telematic system, and you're actually given a set amount of miles per month. I think it's 750 or something like that with Onto, or 800 with Elmo, something like that. And as you drive, apparently those miles go down, so the technology is probably not that far off at all. Also, just think, how much would he charge on his pay-as-you-go driving system in the first place? Let's just say it's a penny a mile. Over the year, if you do about, 10,000 miles, that would equate to about 100 quid a year. And at some point, prices have to go up, and you can't get much higher than an extra penny, can you? So that would be 2p per mile. So instead of costing just £100 for the year, the price would actually double to £200 for the year. And it will go up and up and up since then. Now, of course, he'll probably decide, oh, well, tell you what, we'll sell you some sort of package deal. And it will turn into some sort of mobile phone contract, but for cars. As a bolt-on deal or something like that. It's just absolutely mental. He's got no right sticking his nose into what other people want to do. I mean, no doubt, of course, he's probably thinking that maybe, just maybe, people might just end up using public transport a bit more and thereby generating lots more cash for his Transport for London, the TfL, which it often seems like he kind of likes to bankrupt a bit whenever he crawls back to the government asking for a bit more money. Presumably, of course, his pay-as-you-drive would also go towards Transport for London rather than the government. But if you think about it, he is actually being quite crafty here, because he's introducing the ULEZ scheme much further afield and not forgetting the congestion charge at all. And obviously there's road tax, and he's basically saying, I'll tell you what, we'll scrap all of those things that you obviously hate, which to be honest I do as well, I don't like the thought of them at all, and replace it with this. So basically he's providing some sort of what he thinks is the solution to the problem which he is creating himself. I mean, what an utter a-hole this guy's got to be. It makes me wonder though, apparently he drives a Range Rover, which from what I remember isn't exactly very environmentally friendly as it is. So either he is a massive hypocrite or using himself as some sort of martyr saying, I pay the fees, I pay this much, so you have to pay it as well. Or could he probably get some sort of exemption or use it as some sort of expense to claim back off the government? And who knows? The article says that many more banks are choosing to shut branches, impacting those who prefer to conduct their affairs in person. However, with a shift towards digital banking online or via mobile, banks state that some branches have to close. HSBC has taken the decision to shut 114 branches from this month onwards, and some have just days left before permanent closure. The bank has explained that over the past 5 years, the use of the HSB branch network by regular customers has fallen by 65%. In addition, HSBC stated footfall in the majority of closing branches has reduced by at least 50%. Some of the closing branches are now serving fewer than 250 customers a week. It attributed some of the loss of in-person customers to the COVID-19 pandemic. And HSBC also flagged a shift towards digital banking, with 97.5% of its transactions completed digitally. Since 2017, though, the bank states usage of its mobile app has almost tripled. Jackie Huey, hope I pronounced that right, Managing Director of UK Distribution at HSBC, said people are changing the way they bank, and footfall in many branches is an all-time low, with no signs of it returning. Customers will be able to access services through the post office network, community pop-ups and soon-to-come banking hubs. Ms Yuri added, the bank is committed to supporting the UK's new banking hubs, as well as other community access cash incentives. Following the closures, HSBC UK states it will have a branch network of some 327 branches across the country. Until it decides to close them, presumably, I'm guessing. But then again, we also do have many digital banks that have launched within the past, 10 or so years, like Monzo, for example. I've never used them, but I have heard that people have had a lot of problems with them in the past. And they can sometimes take much longer to sort out because you just can't go down to the bank to do it. And have to rely on, of course, either online chat or waiting in some sort of phone queue, listening to the lift music all the time, which I absolutely hate. As I'm sure nearly every one of you does as well. It does make me wonder, though, how long will actually be before banks are gone completely and are only available online themselves. Kind of like credit cards, I'm guessing, because let's face it, you don't really see a Capital One store pop up anywhere, do you? But they are obviously a different thing, and banks do offer more options than what they do, don't they? And while this might be okay for younger people, it is certainly going to impact the elderly people quite a lot, or people people who are not technologically minded. And no, I'm not trying to say all old people don't know technology. Obviously quite a lot do, but there are some, more than the younger generation, who don't really use apps and things like that. In which case you would have thought that not only would the bank provide a much longer transition than just a few months or whatever, but they would also have their staff try and train people on using mobile apps and things like that in general, wouldn't you? And whilst admittedly, yes, I understand that if the bank isn't getting their business, then they have to do what's right for them and close something which isn't making them money because they have their targets and whatever. But whilst hopefully the post office, pop-up hubs and banking vans or whatever they choose to do will ease the transition a bit or help people, I do think a much better solution would just be if all banks shared the same building. That way there'd still be a bank in every town. They just have the same employees for all the different banks. You'd be able to walk in there, give them your bank card, and they'd be able to get everything up on the system. But it would be where only HSBC can see HSBC details and not TSB details and things like that. And that, in my opinion, is certainly much better than a pop-up bank or a van or whatever going round every so often, because it's there all the time. And with the amount of banks that there are about, they should be able to get quite a lot of people through the door because they'd all be going to that bank rather than the individual ones. It also might be cheaper for them to do it that way as well, because surely the banks would need to advertise the days that they're coming round with these mobile pop-up banks, wouldn't they? And if they did this idea, then they wouldn't have to advertise at all. They just have a building with all the different logos on the front and people just walk in. I guess they just didn't think of that, did they? Going back to Sadiq Khan for a minute, I'm surprised he doesn't want to do what's in this video where people are being fined for being early. Oh, I hope I haven't actually just given him an idea. Anyway, subscribe for more and I'll see you in the next one.